Wakenya wenzangu na wageni wetu siku ya leo, 50 years and 1 year ago, a date that is still within the memory of many still living, this nation gained its self-rule after nearly a century of painful struggle. We pay tribute to the men and women who gave all they had so that we may be free. And we will always remember those who paid the ultimate price for our freedom. And this nation is indeed their gift to us. On that day of our self-government, we rallied behind leaders who demanded not just sovereignty, but also freedom from ignorance, poverty, and disease. As my fellow Kenyans, is to ensure that we complete the journey that they began. The road indeed has been long, but while we cannot claim that every Kenyan lives in dignity and freedom, there is no doubt that we have made immense progress. Fellow Kenyans, at the dawn of our freedom in 1963, the average Kenyan could expect to live 35 years. Today, thanks to the investment in health undertaken by Kenyans and their subsequent governments over the last 51 years, the average Kenyan can expect to live to 64 years. We have fought ignorance valiantly. 51 years ago, there were just 800,000 of our children in primary school. Today, 10 million have a chance of an education paid for by the state. 51 years ago, there were 82 secondary schools in Kenya. Today, there are nearly 10,000. 51 years ago, we had a single public university. Now we have 22 and 9 constituent colleges, while the private sector has established 19 universities and 5 constituent colleges. We take pride in the fact that our armed services have defended our sovereignty and continued to contribute to peace in our region. Let me pause now just for a moment to remember those who have fallen in recent missions. We also, fellow Kenyans, take pride in the bold reform of our most basic law in 2010 to let every Kenyan taste the fruits of our freedom. Of course, these achievements did not come by our strength alone. The grace of God has led us through difficult times. There have been failures, setbacks, and indeed missed opportunities. But instead of lamenting what might have been, we are grateful for the distance we have traveled, and we look forward to what is to come. Ladies and gentlemen, we should also admit the difficulties and dangers of self-government. Madaraka does not require unanimity. In a country as diverse as Kenya, we will always find issues to disagree about. What Madaraka asks of us is that when we disagree, we reason together respectfully. Kila Mkenya, pahali popote alipo, astahili heshima. Some of us have forgotten these truths. Some of us have forgotten that self-rule comes with responsibility. They have yielded to a narrative of negativity which sees every evil in their motherland and their countrymen and rejects every good that has indeed happened. We still face other challenges as a nation that we must continue to confront. Our young people want to match their self-reliance or the self-reliance of their elders, but too many of them cannot even start their own businesses or find the work that would give them that freedom. We must confront a new breed of terrorists who use our freedom and tolerance against us, and use our commitment to the security and prosperity of our friends and neighbors as an excuse for murder. These extremists will attack even children, like Satarin Osinya, but let me say that nothing can justify such heinous acts, and nothing will stop us from bringing the perpetrators of these crimes to justice. Ladies and gentlemen, Madaraka demands that we respond to our trials as a free people in control of our destiny. As indeed we have done since independence, Kenya will meet these challenges. For half a century, too many of us took education to be little more than a path to a job. But experience has taught us that we need many more young Kenyans to start the businesses that will grow our common prosperity. That is why the Youth Enterprise and Development Fund distributed some 1.8 billion shillings to 130,000 of our young people last year in 21,000 groups across the nation. That is also why my government established the Uwezo Fund, which is supplying 6 billion shillings in capital and training that our enterprising young people so urgently need. If we are to create the opportunities that our youth deserve, our economy must grow and indeed diversify. In my government's first year at the helm of this nation, we attained a GDP growth of 4.7%, and when we meet at next year's celebration, I expect to report even better performance. If we look away from sheer growth, our economy is indeed diversifying. We are on course for the transformation required to deliver opportunity and work for every Kenyan. That is as it should be. For even though we have 16 years to make Vision 2030 a reality, it is now clear to me that we can achieve it sooner. Guided by this goal, my government has prepared a number of programs for the coming financial year. The central part is Kenya's first all-inclusive budget for 2014-15 financial year, aimed to delivering direct benefits to 8 key areas in each Kenyan household in the months to come. First, we choose to create a conducive business environment by cleaning up the land registries and our land transaction processes, by accelerating business licensing and registration, by extending and improving public service through the Huduma centers, and indeed by establishing a cashless economy for government services. Second, we invested in agricultural transformation and food security. We have built hundreds of dams and water pans around the country, and we have made fertilizer and other farming inputs and information cheaper and more easily available to our farmers. This has been extended to include cane, tea, and coffee farmers as well. My government also established the Galana irrigation scheme last year, which will eventually bring an additional 1 million acres under irrigation. This year, we have set aside more than 3 billion shillings to continue the project. Kenya's food supplies will be secured. Thirdly, much of our prosperity will come, as it has long come, from joining the skills of our men and women with the trade that comes from our position as the hub of our region. We will be the bridge that connects Africa's rising economies with capital, technology, and markets from across the world, and particularly from Asia. This is why it was so important to complete the agreements for the new standard gauge railway and to begin work on it, as indeed we have. That is why we have been quick to protect and to diversify our tourism, and why we have added a fourth terminal to the Uhuru Kenyatta International Airport. It also explains our devotion to closer integration with our neighbors. The various agreements that we have signed, the upgrading of our port, the building of the new Lamu-Lokichar road and pipeline, the new infrastructure we are building shows our resolve to make the most of our place in the world. Fourth, these advances mean little if we are not healthy. And if the most vulnerable amongst us are abandoned. Last year, my government invested heavily in maternal health care. In my first Madaraka Day speech, it was my pleasure to announce that maternal health care was now free of charge at public health facilities. At last count, 2/3 of deliveries in Kenya were in the hands of trained personnel. Fewer of our mothers suffer unnecessarily in childbirth. In addition, in the upcoming financial year, 4 billion shillings have been set aside to strengthen that program as we move forward. That new investment in an old program will be joined by new investment in new programs. We will set up a fund to pay for the treatment of Kenyans with rare medical conditions. The importance of this initiative was brought home to us a few days ago when a local newspaper carried the story of a young man with a very rare medical condition. Last year also, we began to close the gaps with a substantial devolution of health services. In the next year, my government will, in addition, utilize 3 billion shillings, which will be set aside for the leasing of medical equipment. This will mean that every county will have access to that fund to bring equipment where it is most needed in our nation, and indeed to equalize access to medical care. Fifth, we also stretched our national social safety net to cover more than 230,000 households, our orphans and vulnerable children, our elderly, and Kenyans who live with severe disabilities. Families in the arid parts of our nation have not been forgotten. More than 100,000 households received cash transfers last year. This year, my government has set aside more than 7 billion shillings for our vulnerable children and 4.9 billion shillings for our elders to cover 450,000 households. Our self-government must work for our most vulnerable, and we will make certain that it does. Sixth, if there was one thing our founders prized, ladies and gentlemen, it was education. When we won our freedom, one of their first promises was 7 years of free primary education for Kenyan children. We build on their legacy, and in our new budget, our allocation for primary education will rise by 39% and 33% for secondary education. The extra money means that within 3 years, we will have truly free primary and secondary education, achieving an aspiration as old as our republic. Ladies and gentlemen, seventh, together as we did for the first time 51 years ago, we exercise our Madaraka. Together we choose a new constitution that renewed the promise of self-rule. Together we will enact the collective choice for the changes that it articulates. My government has ensured that resources and support to devolution are delivered with all possible dispatch. That is why only 4 years after we promulgated the Constitution, Kenya is a country with a working system of devolved government. This year, we have raised the county share of revenue to more than 42%, and we will continue to restructure the institutions of government, our intergovernmental bodies, in particular, to fulfill the promise of the new law. Ladies and gentlemen, the fact is that we have much to be proud of. Kenya is doing in a few years what many of the oldest and most powerful nations on earth took centuries to achieve. Fellow Kenyans, eighth, which is the anchor of all our endeavors, is security. Our unity is needed now more than ever before. Terrorists, thieves, and poachers threaten our lives, our property, and our national heritage. Our first defense is our men and women in the disciplined services. My government will stand with them. We are introducing CCTV cameras in major cities and towns, as well as broadband connectivity at border points. We have already provided at least 1,200 vehicles for police, which in time will also be equipped with the necessary technology. Nearly 8,000 young men and women have already joined our discipline services this year. To strengthen them for the challenges to come, this year we are recruiting a further 10,000 police officers to join them. They will enter a police service whose conditions of service are rapidly improving. New housing and insurance will soon be theirs, as we have already set aside 1.6 billion shillings for the police medical insurance scheme. In return, we expect that the standards of discipline and service of our police will also rise to meet the expectations of Kenyans. Our initiatives are not confined to security. To manage it, as well as our immigration, and to gather data for more accurate data collection than we now have, my government will establish a national digital register in the coming financial year. The resources we need have already been set aside, and we can expect a full comprehensive register of persons and property, enterprises and land. Contrary to the voices of controversy, our aim is only to unify the management of our information into a single, credible source of truth about matters of public concern. The whole enterprise calls for responsibility and partnerships between Kenyans and their government. Each of us, above the age of 12, should make sure that our details are captured in the new register. Equally, the Ministries of Interior and Information should show diligence so that we can see this exercise done before the end of the next financial year. Fellow Kenyans, even with all this technology and all these programs we plan to execute, our togetherness remains our most potent weapon. This, I urge you once again, is indeed the time for unity and tolerance. That is why we should meet the neighbors on whom we each depend for our safety. That is the truth behind the Nyumba Kumi initiative. If each Kenyan will join with his neighbor and his government, then neighborhood by neighborhood, we will secure this country. Let us not, fellow Kenyans, forget the lessons taught here. Let us not forget the power of a nation united in goodwill. Indeed, it is our unity of purpose that won the freedom of speech which we now enjoy. Fellow Kenyans, that unity of purpose requires each of us to do our jobs. Those of us in government must serve all Kenyans impartially. Those in opposition are called to offer the ideas that will help this nation leap the hurdles that block our path to the prosperity and unity that we all deserve. Fellow Kenyans, I have said much, and indeed I could say more about the plans my government has to transform and fulfill the aspirations of the Kenyan people. But mine now is to ask you to protect our precious inheritance and to be part of our transformation agenda. Let us look back in gratitude at the distance we have come, and then work together for the day when, under God's guidance, we will fulfill the aspirations of our generation. In conclusion, let me reaffirm that this is our year for action. We have made elaborate plans, and now we must make a solemn pledge that this year we shall work smarter and harder, and we shall be driven by the tried truth that hard work and responsibility brings progress. Citizenship and patriotism, fellow Kenyans, means each one of us playing their part. Obeying the laws, paying your taxes, and being responsible. Every one of us must devote our talents and time to serving our fellow countrymen and women. I am confident we shall succeed, for we are determined. I thank you, fellow Kenyans and friends of Kenya. May God bless you, and may God bless Kenya. Asante. Mimi sina mengi ambaye ningependa kutaja isipokuwa kuchukua nafasi hii kuwatakia kila Mkenya pahali popote alipo kila laheri siku hii ambaye tunasherehekea miaka 51 kutoka tupate madaraka yetu kama nchi na tukaweza kujitawala. Vile nimesema, tumetoka mbali na ni mengi ambaye tumeweza kuyatenda kama nchi, lakini bado tuko na mengi ambaye tunahitajika kufanya ndio tuwe na Kenya ambaye itakuwa ya manufaa kwetu sisi zote. Na mimi siku ya leo yangu ni kuwauliza viongozi wote, yangu ni kuwauliza Wakenya wote, tujue ya kwamba ndio tuweze kuimarisha taifa letu, ndio tuweze kuhakikisha ya kwamba tuko na taifa ambalo kila Mkenya anajivunia. Lazima kila mmoja wetu ajitolee, lazima kila mmoja wetu aweze kutembea pamoja na mwenzake, na ndio tuweze kubadilisha taifa letu la Kenya. Siasa pekee haiwezi kutuwezesha kubadilisha taifa letu. Ni kazi yetu, ni mawazo yetu ambaye itatuwezesha kufanya hivi. Na mimi kama rais wa Jamhuri ya Kenya niko tayari kufanya kazi na wale wote ambao wako tayari kuungana pamoja na serikali yetu kuinua hali ya maisha ya wananchi wa Jamhuri hii yetu ya Kenya. Na mimi sina shaka ya kwamba kufaulu tutafaulu. Nikimalizia, na sikuwa nikitaka kusema haya lakini wacha tu niseme. Kuna wenzetu na ni Wakenya pia ambao walikuwa wanasema jana, na nikafurahia kidogo nikasikia wakisema wanataka tukae tuongee kama Wakenya. Haya ndio sisi tunataka wenzangu. Mambo ya national dialogue, serikali yangu kwa muda wa miezi 5 sasa tumekuwa tukijipanga, na sisi tuko tayari kuongea na viongozi wote na stakeholders wote kuhusu mambo ambayo inahusu Wakenya. Tuko na mambo ya wage bill yetu ambaye lazima tujadiliane tutafanya namna gani. Tuko na jambo ya ugaidi ambaye inagusa kila Mkenya pahali ambapo alipo. Sisi tumealika viongozi wote na nimefurahi. Sasa kale wapinzani wetu wamekubali pia kuungana na sisi. Karibu muingie katika taratibu, tuende kazi, hakuna shida. Tuende kazi. Sio mambo ya kutisha au kushurutisha au nini. Mipangilio ya serikali iko. Ingieni tutembee pamoja. Sisi tuasema serikali yetu ni serikali ya Wakenya wote na tunataka kuunganisha wote. Mambo ya matusi haifai. Kama uko na mawazo weka kwa meza, tujadiliane, tusonge mbele. Yale ambaye ningependa kumalizia kusema ni ya kwamba sisi tunashukuru Wakenya walitupatia jukumu la kuongoza serikali hii kwa muda ya miaka 5. Na sisi tuko tayari kuiongoza. Kwa hivyo wale ambao wanafikiria ya kwamba kuna mambo ya nusu mkate, hakuna hiyo. Serikali hii ni imara na tunasonga mbele, lakini tunakaribisha wote waje tujadiliane pamoja juu ya maendeleo ya taifa hili letu la Kenya. That we welcome. Lakini serikali iko imara. Kwa hayo machache na mengi, Mungu awabariki. Muwe na Jumapili sawa. Tuendelee na kazi, Kenya isonge mbele. Asanteni sana.